Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is HBR Talk numero. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Wait. My name is Brian. Sorry about that. Number 222. So we're 222. That's what today's show is. Trans man finds he lost his feminine or female privilege, and Ana Akana gaslights to protect feminism. So, we are going to be responding to a video that I came across. Actually, someone who is on my friends list sent it to me, but it is a response to I guess there was a Tumblr post written by a trans man, and someone screenshotted it and posted it on Twitter, and there's a lot of discussion and debate surrounding it. And Ana Akana, who you guys might know from, how do I put it? She blew up on social media. She's also been in some movies since then, so I guess she's like technically an actress now, but she still runs her own YouTube channel where she basically, talks about, at first she made sketches that were just sort of like comedy stuff, a little feminist, but not really all that offensive. That was early on, but she's basically like gone like full activist from what I know. I haven't really been following her recently, but I do know where she stands on things politically, and that in particular with gender dynamics. So Ana Akana made a response video, and the video had a very interesting and intriguing title. It was called "How Trans Men Expose Female Privilege." And I said, oh, that's kind of interesting. I thought, shit, that sounds pretty spicy. Exactly. Like what could this mean? But all I'll say is the worm does turn. So you guys, I want to let you guys guess, in what way is she going to essentially maneuver around this conundrum that trans men, so people born as women that later go on to get surgery or take hormones so they can live as men, this trans man is discovering that there was something to being a woman that had some inherent advantages.
Shock and surprise.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Surprise. So let's first, I would like to start by reading the trans man's claim. And you're not going to be able to see it, so I'm probably just going to because I have all these filters so that we can watch the video. So I'm going to read the letter, the original letter, which you can find online. I can probably put a link to it in the description as well if you want to, but I believe there's a link in Ana Akana's video, which is also linked in the description. So Skaldish says, "I'm pretty quiet about the fact that I'm a trans man usually, but holy shit, I need to tell you about the culture shock I'm going through because it's blindsiding me. There's a huge sense of social isolation that comes with being perceived as male, because now people are subconsciously treating me as a potential predator. All strangers, no matter their gender, keep their guard up around me. It made me realize that there is no inherent camaraderie in male socialization as there is in female socialization. Unless, of course, it is in very specific environments. And the fact I don't ambiently experience this mutual kinship in basic exchanges anymore is an insanely lonely feeling. You know how badly this would have fucked my mind up if I had grown up with this? It's 4:30 a.m. and I'm mourning the loss of a privilege I didn't even know I had. Anyway, I'm going to figure out how to navigate this. Don't know how yet, but I'm gonna." And that's the letter, or the message. So I guess just so you guys know, I am obviously here with Hannah and Lauren. I forgot to introduce them before. I'm sorry. So I guess without going overly deep into this, what are your guys' initial impressions based on this person's letter?
Well, my first impression was, the first thing that I took away from it was her the this idea that there's some kind of female camaraderie, right? Like there's some inherent just natural and there is to some extent, right? But let a woman challenge another woman and you will find out just how fast you will be excluded from the quote unquote sisterhood.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my first thought when she said, oh, there's no inherent camaraderie in male socialization. And I thought, well, I mean, you're calling it camaraderie, but the fact is you're basically discovering that men are more individualistic. Not necessarily that they're, they oppose each other, or that there's any like hostility or whatever. I think it's that men generally don't have like a social network that is codependent. I think that in general, men are individualists. So you're not individualist because you're probably still pretty female in the brain, and this is bothering you because men aren't like women.
Mm-hmm.
So from outside of masculinity, here's what I've noticed, hanging out with a lot of guys. And like my whole life, I've gotten along with groups of guys better than I've gotten along with groups of women. I get along with individual women just fine, but women in a group turn into like the predators from Zootopia, or worse, the prey from Zootopia that were trying to criminalize the predators, right? And it drives me nuts. Men socialize just as much as women do. Mm-hmm. They just don't talk incessantly about it all the time. Right. Women, like half of women's socialization is talking about socializing. And it's this is where gossip comes from. Who's sleeping with who? Who's wearing what? Who got in a fight with who? Who did this? Who did that? Who said this? What you should think of it, and all that stuff. Men just do things together. And when one of my male friends is suffering, my other male friends do not ignore him. They support him in masculine ways, which means they don't sit around and talk about the nail unless they are brainstorming, how do we fix this? How do we get that nail out of your skull? And they don't sit around and talk about how they feel about it necessarily, but they don't ignore the fact that their buddy is down. And I've seen guys take weeks off of work. I've seen guys, give up things that were near and dear to them, items that were of great value to them, that were highly sentimental and so on, just to figure out a way to raise somebody's spirits or get somebody help. Get a guy into rehab, get a guy into mental health treatment, get a guy off of the edge of a cliff, and that definitely is camaraderie. It's definitely a social support network. It's just women don't think they're doing it right because they don't talk about it incessantly. And I think failure to accept that there is a difference between how women socialize with each other and how men socialize with each other versus like the opposite sex and everything, and treating it like if one is different from the other, one must be doing it wrong, is dangerous to both sexes, because you end up in a situation where what works for men can't be allowed without disturbing women, and what works for women can't be allowed without imposing it on men.
Right.
And that's not fair to either sex.
Yeah. It also, for me, puts into perspective that, a trans man, because they don't know like men's experience. So their female experience when they were, before they transitioned, is coloring what they are perceiving their experiences now that they're men. So this woman, or this trans man, okay, is basically saying, I just realized that everyone treats me like a predator. all strangers keep their guard up around me. And I'm like, yeah, well, welcome to being a dude. Like, that's literally just male experience. And men basically adapt because they have to. They experience it very young. So they're just like, yeah, this is what my life is. So they're selective about who they spend their time with. They are generally more, skeptical because they are also being treated with skepticism. This is the norm. And I'm not even like certain that it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think that we should also be treating women with similar scrutiny. And I think the problem is that we don't. And this woman, well, this person who was a woman and is now a man, is experiencing the difference. And she said, he is concluding that she, when he was a woman, had some privilege. And it makes me wonder, are there trans men that are only existing as trans men because they were hoping to get some male privilege? And so they like took this they made this life-changing decision in the hopes that they could rake in some of that male privilege and get that better job and become a CEO or whatever it is that feminists have fed them about male privilege. And then they become trans men and they realize that life is hard for men. And in fact, it's going to be even harder for these trans men in some ways, because they're going to struggle to find a partner unless they only travel in circles with other trans men and trans women, which is possible. And they're also going to always essentially, like, they're always going to struggle in their relationships because if they meet a woman, if they're into women and they meet a woman, they're not going to have what that woman ultimately wants. And, which could be a family, at least a penis. So I think they're going to run into some problems.
Yeah, I think there's something to what you're saying there, right? Because if you think about it, if you are uncomfortable as a female growing up in your own body and you think that I think I should have been a man, it symbolizes some kind of freedom from the trappings of being a female, growing up and going through, puberty and having your period and wearing makeup and bras and all this other girly type of thing. You want to be released from those trappings because it doesn't feel normal, right? So I think that may be some, impetus into why they go that route. But they, the freedom, quote unquote, freedom of being a man tends to, you don't really understand what it is to be a man. So you can't understand, or you can't equate freedom with being a man until you actually try to walk a mile in their shoes. And then you really see what it's like. And even if you're past, a lot of them do as opposed to male to female, who a lot of them do not pass, but it doesn't hit the same, you know what I mean? It's my God, now all of these social expectations are now put upon me because I'm seen as this other gender, which is what you wanted to be in the first place, right? That's what you thought you wanted. Well, hey, now here's the whole bag.
I wonder how it's going to strike him the first time he's someplace with a woman and something gets, scary or hinky about the situation, and he's suddenly faced with, this woman expects me to protect her.
Yep. I was just going to say, that's the other thing too, is that, see, when you're a woman, our society just acknowledges women. There's nothing that a woman has to do or perform or act out that is required of them so that we can then acknowledge them as women. Women are women by default, okay? We consider them women. But men are only men if they perform. So being a man is not simply being a male. Being a man means something. You have to earn so much money. You have to make the woman feel safe. You have to protect, people that are weaker than you. That there is a reason why, and it's not like an explicitly conservative idea, although I know it comes out of there. It's feminists do it too. Male feminists do it. Like, everybody does it. They basically say, if you're a real man, you will do these things. And so what this this trans man is discovering is that being a man isn't simply about hormones. It's about expectations. And it's about things that you have to get used to, which is the idea that people are going to perceive you as potentially dangerous. And women in particular are going to do this, because women are generally, at least in our current modern society, afraid of men. Like, they're afraid of them. They're not comfortable around them. They've been conditioned to fear them and treat them as dangerous. So now that you decided to live as a man, you are not only going to realize that being a man isn't simply identifying as one, because that's what you're trying to do, and there's no shortcut. You have to actually do masculinity. And she or he may discover that that's going to be that's another culture shock that she or he is not coming to grips with, because when you were a woman, you didn't have to live up to any standard. You could just be. And people will say you're a woman. You could wear pants. You could wear a fucking flower dress. Like, none of that mattered, because everyone just accepted that's a woman. It's okay. No need to change anything here. And that's it. But men, it doesn't work that way. And I think in many ways, it's probably better for men in the long run that we do that to some degree, because we don't want men to end up the way that we've treated women. You know, I wouldn't want that, but because it weakens everyone. Okay, so anyway, does anyone have any final thoughts on that letter before we get into Ana Akana's response?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of explain the thing that I said in our chat, and it's been a long time since this happened, but years ago, a trans woman wrote this really long ass diatribe in Reddit's men's rights subreddit. As a person who has been on both sides of the gender fence, quote unquote, and cited a bunch of feminist stereotypes as this is what it's like to be a woman, and I had no idea it was this rough, and it was all about, victimhood and not being taken seriously in the workplace and all kinds of things like that. And she didn't take into consideration, she said that she passed. She didn't take into consideration the possibility that maybe she didn't pass as well as she thought she did. Maybe people were not taking her fully seriously because they viewed her as anything from a man in a dress to a woman who was a little off. And I could tell you from personal experience that if people decide you're a woman who's a little off, they will treat you very differently than they treat other women. But there were a bunch of us that tried to, explain different things to her. And a few of us tried to explain, like, transitioning doesn't make you an expert on all women's experiences. And it doesn't overwrite women's experiences with yours. And this actually really pissed her off. And she started reporting everybody in the conversation. And the mods had to come out and say, we're not going to ban people for talking to you. And it was like, we tried to explain, she was failing to account for the likelihood that people are responding to her differently than they do to biological women, because maybe she doesn't quite, in character or in poise or any of that, maybe she doesn't pass. Maybe she looks more like a trans woman than a cis woman than she thinks. And, that pissed her off too, because, like, she wanted to believe, and she wanted to believe that she could just sort of walk in and tell everybody this is what it's like to be a woman, and this is why you have to bow to the feminist narrative about female experiences. And it kind of feels like there are valid things about what this trans man has said about the male position in the world, but he's still experiencing it from the perspective of someone who grew up with female experiences. Mm-hmm. And like I said the other day in HBR News, when I was talking about the difference in how I experience head pain versus ear pain, where I'm so used to head pain that I don't notice it until, like, the migraine interferes with my vision or makes me nauseous. But if I get an earache, it's off the charts. Like immediately, I'm a total wimp about it because I've only had 2 in my entire life. And when you haven't experienced something all of your life, it might seem bigger or more. You might get a distorted view of it. You might view it from a perspective that it is more of a bad thing than it really is, or that it impacts you in a way that it wouldn't impact you if you had experienced it all the time your whole life growing up. And so you can't necessarily take what someone who has transitioned says about the experience of the gender that they transitioned to and use it as a bludgeon against people who are advocating for a right to just be themselves without having an ideology come in and say, this is how to be a man, this is how to be a woman. And unfortunately, this narrative, I never noticed these things about the opposite sex until I became one. My view of what it's like to be that person must be true. Well, no, everybody's an individual. You have your experiences, and they're not invalidated by the fact that you transitioned, but you can't write them over other people's experiences either. Transitioning doesn't make you a gender expert. It is a thing that you had to do in order to survive your experiences of gender, not a thing that tells you what everybody else's experiences are like. And I guess the way I would put it is, and this is kind of the way I ended the conversation with the trans woman in the men's rights subreddit, was, if you can't, if you need womanhood to change in order for you to be a woman and be comfortable being a woman, maybe transitioning wasn't the right thing for you. And if you need womanhood to change society-wide in order for trans women to be accepted, or if you need manhood to change society-wide in order for trans men to be accepted, then maybe transitioning is not as effective as you think. It's not an entitlement that you can just impose on people who are cis. Mm-hmm. To use the G Mafia word, people that grew up the same sex all their lives, identify as that sex, and are comfortable with it. And unfortunately, I think that's a boundary that's going to have to be drawn by people who are not trans, by the normies of the gender spectrum. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't draw it, we're all going to get erased. We're all going to get told you can't be who you are.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what queer theory is, but that's another conversation. So let's thank you for you guys' input. And I think now we're going to move on and listen to Ana Akana's response to this. But first, I did get a super chat. Albert Nader Retro gives us $5 Canadian and says, this chick should have read Self-Made Man by Nora Vincent before making the switch. But the thing is, I think that there are people who probably reject Nora Vincent's anecdote or her experience. And even Nora Vincent, I don't think that she really, obviously she realized that male privilege is a myth and that men have their own sets of problems. And she came to that realization by doing this. But even then, she doesn't really know the depths of it because she chose later in life to try on the male skin suit. And what did she last, 3 months or something? And then she was like, I can't do this anymore. It was like doing psychological harm. And I think most of that, it's not even me claiming that men have it so bad that women can't possibly conceive of it. But I think it's like the shock of coming to the realization of how good your life was and how convinced you were of the opposite is what she's experiencing. So, and I think the same is I don't think there's a trans man anywhere that could fully understand that difference. And I think part of it comes from this notion that men and women are identical and interchangeable, and that we don't have anything about us that's evolved differently. So men's resilience to, all of the pitfalls that they have, it's a product of their evolution just as much as anything, right? So this is why they can handle these things better than trans men. So even trans women could probably handle, these things more. I mean, I think, this is one of the reasons why perhaps trans women experience more violence than trans men do. Because, well, for one, they don't pass as well, but also the environment they're in is probably pretty, things get pretty emotional and violent. So, usually it's interpersonal. Usually it's not like what the G Mafia will have you believe, where they're like, oh, trans women are being murdered because there's just like transphobes like stalking the streets looking to murder trans women. No, I mean, sometimes assaults happen because, heterosexual men get fooled by trans women and they become angry. But most of the time, the violence that trans women experience is interpersonal. It's in their circle. It's in their social group, because they're constantly fighting. So, but anyway, and they have problems with drugs and alcohol and stuff. Okay,
part of the thing that changes with trans women and that they're not prepared for, and it's the opposite of what feminists think about testosterone. But testosterone moderates violent impulses in a lot of different circumstances. So if you're a higher testosterone person, you are more likely to have control over any violent impulses you might have because you get angry or whatever. But if you go on estrogen for a long time and you lower the testosterone in your body at the same time, you're screwing around with chemistry that can actually take away your ability to temper those impulses. And it does change a person dramatically in that, you become handicapped in a way and you have to relearn. It's very big difference.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 more super chats I just got. Albert Nader Retro gives us $2 Canadian and says, Nora lived in drag lewd thing for 18 months. Well, I knew it was something like a number of months. So Meredith G gives us $5 and says, honey for the badgers, there is a rite of passage people go through during puberty that shape us that can't be replicated by transition sexes. Yeah. So for sure, except that the rite of passage for women doesn't really exist right now. I think that we generally let women live as they wish. But I have talked to some guests that look into this stuff from various angles, and I've asked them about a woman's rite of passage, if such a thing existed and what it was. And you can look those up on I know that they have, but it depends on the society. So, and Duncan Alexander gives us 70 czars and says suffering is universal. It is, but what men and women experience as hardships are frequently very different. So I don't think that, everyone's going to suffer. That's the thing about living on this planet. But I think that
and it is relative as time.
Yeah. So, but yeah, thank you for those super chats. Now, let us now check out this video. So this is Ana Akana's video, and the title kind of got me sucked in. The title is How Trans Men Expose Female Privilege. And so from that perspective, I was like, oh shit, is she going to be sympathetic to the notion that women have, I don't even like to use the word privilege, but I think it's absolutely cancerous word designed to essentially create, a divide between groups of people, just to say that this group has privilege. I think that in general, women's experience, it does come with some unique advantages. We know what they are, but men have some too. And I think that it's fair. Who has more, who has it worse? I don't know. That doesn't really matter to me that much. But I thought, maybe she's going to talk about something important. To it, I would still have had like some criticisms anyway, but by like, for example, the fact that she apparently doesn't listen to men when they talk about female privilege, but she'll listen to a trans man that talks about it. So, you know, like regular men who have been experiencing this for their entire lives, which are literally everywhere, and they have like, you know, concerns, complaints, and beef, or not beef, but like they have issues, you know, with women and the way that we're supposed to treat them. Nah, I don't want to hear any of that. But a trans man comes out and says, actually, we're all ears.
It's kind of like the black people who won't listen to anyone who has anything to say, whether it be about politics or anything else, but let a white man say it, and then they're like, oh yeah, that sounds right. But if the same information comes from a black person, nope, they want no parts of it. Yeah.
So all right, let's take a listen.
So there's this viral tweet going around from a Tumblr account from a person named Zan, who is a trans man, detailing the culture shock he's experienced post-transition. It was really eye-opening and interesting to hear that he has been perfectly positioned to gain insight into unique gender dynamics and social conditioning. So I'm just gonna straight up read most of Zan's post to you, because I thought it was incredibly perceptive. And I wanna amplify it, but I don't wanna risk messing up his words or his message. So here we go.
All right, I'm just pausing it there for the banana. I'm gonna let her read the letter again, because I don't know if I'll be able to find the end of it, and she does kind of like add some little video things to it. So
I'm pretty quiet about the fact that I'm a trans man, but holy shit, I need to tell you about the culture shock I'm going through because it's blindsiding me. There is this huge sense of social isolation that comes with being perceived as male, because now people are subconsciously treating me as a potential predator. All strangers, no matter their gender, keep their guard up around me. It made me realize that there is no inherent camaraderie in male socialization, like there is in female socialization, unless, of course, it's in very specific environments. And the fact that I don't ambiently experience—
It's going to the pause button.
Oh, that's because I'm hovering over but were you able to hear it?
Yeah, okay. We just couldn't see
I think I understand why now. So, I hover over the play button so that I can pause it. But what it does is it creates a new window, a really tiny one, that says pause or play, and that's what you're seeing because I'm sharing the Brave browser and it only shows the active window. Now I understand why that happens. Okay, so she says masculine camaraderie only like truly exists under certain contexts, and then it shows I guess like a bunch of men with guns, like they're going to do some kind of crime, or it shows some men in a huddle. Well, they're actually women wearing mustaches because I guess she doesn't have any male friends, and they're about to like play some competitive sports. And so now that's not in the letter from the trans man. He's not making that claim.
I was gonna say,
no, but Ana Akana is essentially extracting from that, only certain contexts, like when they're being violent or when they're being violent. Because competitive sports to feminists that men do, that's still violence, or at least it leads to violence or something, right? So, so that's what she's saying. But I'm gonna let her finish the letter and then get her response, and then we'll respond to that.
Mutual kinship in basic exchanges anymore is an insanely lonely feeling. You know how bad this would have fucked up my mind if I had grown up like this? It is 4:30 a.m. and I'm mourning the loss of a privilege I didn't know I had. Frankly, this is something I would have never understood without living the experience. It is now blatantly clear to me that most cis men probably experience chronic emotional malnutrition. They're deprived of social connection just enough for it to seriously fuck with their psyches, but not enough for them to realize that it's happening and what's causing it. It's like—
All right, I'm pausing it there for the banana. Do you guys have any thoughts on that so far? She's still reading the letter, so she hasn't put in her 2 cents.
So this is country mouse city mouse syndrome, right? And I've seen this a lot in my life because I when I tell people about like my healthcare experiences and everything, they're like, oh my gosh, that would be so hard. I couldn't live with that. And my first thought is, yes, you could. You just don't know it because you haven't done it. And that's the reality of the difference between men and women. If you put a woman in a man's life without context, without any predicating experiences that give her warning, this is what it's going to be like, it's going to be an alien experience for her. And she's going to view it as a traumatic experience. But if you put a man in a woman's life, the same thing is going to happen, especially if you take a man who has grown up in an environment where his masculinity is specifically built around him having an expectation of personal accountability, where he has an expectation of social obligation, and then he goes into the life of a woman who is raised not to be accountable for herself at all. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it is something women are traumatized by growing up like that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that men are traumatized by growing up as boys either. Could we be better about how we treat boys? Absolutely. Are boys deserving of things that we are not giving them in today's society? 100%. But it doesn't necessarily mean that masculinity itself is a prison that men need to be let out of. We need to recognize men's right to be masculine without being treated like it's criminal behavior in and of itself, and they're humaning wrong because they're not womaning as men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I get from this as well, because again, even the trans man that's writing this is injecting a female perspective because that's been their whole life up until this point.
Right.
So her experience, even living as a man, even if she totally 100% passes, it doesn't actually account for an actual man's experience that's of the same age. So, I mean, she doesn't even know the half of it. And the really hilarious thing is that Ana Akana only feels that this person is worth responding to and actually listening. When men, you can find men anywhere that'll be willing to tell you the exact same thing, and it will be more valid because they have been alive as men much longer. So,
yeah.
All right. Anyway, continuing this.
It's like they're starving, but they don't know this because they've always been served 3 meals, except those meals have never been big enough. This deprivation comes from all sides of the aisle, by the way. In the case of women, when I'm out in public and interact with them, all of them come off as incredibly aloof, cold, and mirthless. I have never experienced this before, even though I know exactly what this composure is, the armor that keeps away creepy-ass men. As someone who used to wear this myself,
All right, I'm pausing it there. So this is a bit longer than the version I read because it goes into more. So this trans man is now experiencing what it's like when women treat them as creeps. And again, I get it's frustrating, but welcome to being a man. That's just what it is. Sorry. I mean, I don't know what you expect, but I mean, this person did this to men when they were a woman. So you did this to men, and then you became a man, and then women did it to you, and now you're all like, oh, that's not cool. I'm hurt. This hurts.
Yeah, nobody brings me flowers. What's going on?
Oh, it's even worse than that. Nobody. That's one of the things that Karen did that I thought was pretty interesting in her blog was she created something called a female privilege checklist. Now, the female privilege checklist was a response to a feminist post called the male privilege checklist. And the male privilege checklist was full of petty things like, people take me seriously in a work environment. And the assumption you're supposed to make is that people don't take women seriously in work environments, but they automatically take men seriously in work environments, and it represents the feminist failure to recognize that when men are taken seriously in a work environment, it is because they have demonstrated competence and reliability, and the ability to subjugate their own interests to teamwork. And when people don't take women seriously in a workplace, a lot of times it's because they've got eye problems. I'm more important than you are. I want to do it this way. I feel this way about it, and so on. And so, because they have these eye problems, they can't see the rest of the team, and it screws up their work relationships. So there's all these things that are listed as male privilege that are actually things that women just don't understand how men do them. Well, there are things on Karen's list that, when you read it, you really have to acknowledge, actually, women don't earn any of this. And one of them is people will accept that if I lay a boundary and I enforce it and I'm not polite about it, and I don't remember how it was worded, but basically, if I'm an aloof asshole in a public environment around other people, they'll just assume that it's because I've had experiences that lead me to be concerned about proximity to men and other people.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny because me being capable of not being aloof, not being I can be rude as hell, but I'm not necessarily aloof. I'm more like, I'll tell you off in very colorful language, but fornication upon you and upon your equine transportation to this location, that kind of thing. But yeah, because of that, people assume that I've never been victimized, and I've actually been a repeat victim of violent crime. I just don't let it color my opinions of people who were not participants in those circumstances. Like, everybody else didn't do it, so I try not to judge them as guilty of being probable criminals. But in any case, that like, this is something that, I guess the best way I can put it is, there is some validity to the female privilege dialogue where there isn't to the male privilege dialogue.
Yeah.
And the validity to the female privilege dialogue is society is more invested in women's welfare. And so society accepts things from women that it would not accept from men, and individual people will manifest that in different ways. And society will give things to women that are not given to men, and again, it will manifest differently with different people. And that's something that is a challenge probably for both sexes crossing the gender line to deal with.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lauren.
I kind of live that, because I work in a male-dominated field, right? And so I'm the only female back there, and I have to bark orders at these guys to make them do what I need them to do to fall in line with compliance, right? And I'm not nice about, listen, I'll be nice the first couple of times. There's one thing about me, I hate repeating myself. So, because it shows a lack of respect. If you're not listening to me the first time that I'm telling you something, you're not paying attention, and your attention is somewhere else. I don't like that. So if I have to repeatedly tell you to do something, and I'm learning that I have to be easy with the new hires because they're not used to this level of scrutiny. So I'm backing down a little bit, but after a while, it's like, no, you need to do this. Shut the fuck up. There's no holds barred. And nobody will, they can't really say anything to me. Number one, because I'm right. You know what I mean? I'm not asking them to do anything that's out of line. I'm asking them to do what their job is. But I think it's because I'm a female and I'm allowed to have that leeway to just go all in on them if I feel like it. I don't have to. But some of them they like to play. I got this one new guy. I don't know what's going on with him, but he's a little weird, but I'm sensitive to him, right? So he likes to come through, and his thing is like he likes to come and say, "Oh, fucking ball torture," and he like he's got Tourette's or something. Like, okay, all right. The first couple of times it was all right. Okay, now it's just boring, and I gotta like tell him in no uncertain terms to shut the hell up. Let's move on. So
a woman can get away with being a drill sergeant in an environment where she is not actually a drill sergeant. A man, it depends on the men that he works with and the environment that he's in. And there's a lot of environments where if a man comes off as trying to be a drill sergeant in an environment where there is no drill sergeant, the other guys treat him as an asshole, and he loses respect instead of getting shit done. I've seen that as well.
And I think there's a better chance that things could become violent, like they could fight if it's a man doing that than a woman. I think men will generally try to avoid that, and even if they don't like the woman, they'll try to work around it, or they'll just avoid her or whatever. So okay, so anyway, let's get back to the video.
I know that this armor is 100% impersonal. Nobody likes wearing it. And I can say with absolute certainty that women would dump the armor in favor of unconditional companionship with men if doing this didn't run the risk of actual assault. Trust me when I say that women aren't just being needlessly guarded. But I only have
She's never been assaulted.
Never.
Because I've experienced female socialization. If I hadn't, I would have thought this coldness was a conspiracy against me devised by roughly half the human population. Even now.
All right, so this is another 30-second clip. So, again, she's still quoting the trans man. So the trans man is saying this. The trans man is saying that, oh, I understand why women wear the armor because they're actually at risk of assault, right? Even though that's really unlikely. And
being aloof doesn't protect you from getting assaulted. No. It just makes it less likely for you to have someone around to help you when someone who actually is dangerous. If you treat all the good men the same as you treat the bad men, there won't be a good man around to even call the cops, because you're being assaulted when the bad man does something. And even worse, you end up getting isolated with other women, and there are bad women. And you have no protection against them at all either.
Yeah. And again, this is all the thing that's being left out, and I understand why. So the trans man is basically saying all of this paranoia that women have around men is completely justified because, men are a threat to women. So this person that transitioned to being a man knows that, and they're taking this forward. They even did it themselves, but they're sort of like taking on this premise that the fear that women experience must be valid because otherwise they wouldn't feel it,
right?
So, and it's like, no, maybe you're paranoid, maybe
if you talk someone into believing that being looked at is an infringement and being spoken to incorrectly is an infringement on your person. It's an attack or an assault. And I had this long conversation back and forth with a lot of different people around that video that just went around with the guy that wanted people's handshakes and everything. And actually a lot of women articulate to me that they felt that being offered an unsolicited handshake in public was a form of assault. That never would have occurred to me. You look at that video, and yeah, it's edited, but it's still real people. It's not actors and actresses. So what the guy put together was it looks like to me the common responses of people, and a lot of the guys were just delighted to have somebody offer to shake their hand, and some of them were real enthusiastic about it, right? And the women all gave him the hairy eyeball and looked down their noses at him. There were enough women who did that it was, and it was not just women that were by themselves, women that were with a man who would have no reason to just suddenly be afraid of this guy on the street. And when women commented to me on my comment regarding that, because a handshake is a gesture of peace and trust and goodwill. It evolved as, I'm not going to attack you. Look, here's my empty weapon hand. You can clasp it and we'll shake it. And if I got something up my sleeve, it's going to fall out. Right? That is, it's a lot of trust, because the other person can still hurt you. And it evolved specifically to communicate, let's be civil with each other, let's be non-aggressive with each other. And these women communicated to me, well, he might just be planning to stab you with the other hand. He could tickle your palm with his middle finger. And I'm like, what is this? Palm rape? Are you serious? Like, okay, somebody does that to you. Is it going to ruin your whole life, or even your whole day, or for that matter, the next 5 minutes? Because if somebody does that to me, I'm going to laugh. I mean, like, what the hell? But women take things as acts of aggression when men do them that men would never consider acts of aggression. And it's...
You know what they should do? The same person should make another video where a woman offers to shake hands with people and see what happens. And I guarantee you, men and women will shake her hand.
Oh yeah. But
it'll be
attitude of aloofness. It's not legitimate. It's based on that attitude of taking things as aggression that are not aggression, and taking things as trespasses against your person that are not. They're not assault. You're not a victim of getting a handshake in public.
Right. And Brian, if they did do that video, you remember that the viral video of the woman walking around Manhattan? And It would be that on steroids. And it would just be...
Oh yeah, I mean, men will be lining up to shake a woman's hand. It's like contact with the opposite sex. Like,
absolutely.
But if they were just straight up fair with it, I think that the main contrast you would see is that a man offering his hand will get it from other men, which I thought was super fucking cool, by the way. But like get ignored most of the time by women. But if they got a woman to do it, everyone would be fine, because women aren't perceived as a threat. That's the ultimate thing, right? So even if they are a threat, they're not perceived as a threat.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's continue the video.
Now, with all I know about navigating the world as a woman, I am failing to convince my monkey brain that this armor is not social rejection. And as for male socialization, again, it seems taboo for a man to be platonically intimate with men for reasons I have yet to fully understand, but I think it boils down to A, the fact that society teaches boys that it's not okay to be soft with each other, and B, garden variety homophobia. Our media...
Okay, so she doesn't understand... Yeah, she doesn't understand male camaraderie.
No.
Because she's a female. She's looking at it from a female perspective, and she presumes the female perspective is superior. So it's the right way to socialize.
Yeah. One of my first experiences of being on the sidelines right next to a moment of male intimacy was that fight that I talk about, the Halloween night candy mugging, where we get told by some of the other kids, like, it was our first year, my brother and me and our friend, going out without parents, which you could do in the 80s. And I was 11. I was the oldest. And then our friend was 10, and my brother was 9. And some kids came along, and they're like, there's some older kids mugging kids for their candy, and they told us who it was, and it was some 14 and 15-year-old kids. And we're like, we knew, this was inevitable. The boys talked about it, and they pretty much analyzed the situation together. They faced the recognition, we cannot get out of this fight. It will either come to us now, or a worse fight will come to us later if we take steps to avoid this. And then They recognized they were with a girl. They chose the positions they were going to take up in order to strategize the fight and defend me. And I observed all of this as like an 11-year-old, just being a nerdy little 11-year-old. I understood that they were taking on responsibilities that should be the oldest kid's responsibilities, because the oldest kid was a girl and this was a fight. And I don't know if everybody understands that when that happens. If every girl has an opportunity to figure that out. But I think guys have a level of intimacy in analyzing and solving problems that girls don't understand. Mm-hmm. And it is a lot like how girls have a level of intimacy in analyzing and solving emotional experiences as if they are a puzzle. And so when they went, then we walked down the street and the fight happened. Afterward, there was a bond that, and I was included in it because I fought. But there was a bond, and there's been a bond for the rest of our lives between the three of us over that moment, and over, we had each other's backs. And I've never had that in quite that way with a girl. Like, I've had other girls' backs in social situations, but I've never fought back to back with another girl. Never had another girl come pounding down the sidewalk, and break somebody's nose because they had dragged me down the street and were trying to wrestle a bag out of my arms. And the only other time I've had the opportunity to fight like that, when another girl was present, she stood back and watched it happen. She didn't get involved. She just, the one thing that she did to get involved was tell my opponent where I grew up. My opponents ran away. Because of where I'm not kidding. She's from such and such. Oh, I'm out. No, to be fair, I had just done something extremely violent in the moment, but that scared, the thing that scared them wasn't my violence. It was her telling them where I was from. And it's not even it's not an inner city place. It was a small town, right? But yeah. It wasn't the same. And her thinking that men don't have that is her not understanding how men have that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, we have discovered that male camaraderie is not like female camaraderie. It's almost like men and women are a bit different.
Men are from... Men are from Mars. Men are from Mars, and women are from the cushy planet.
There isn't a cushy Earth.
Yeah.
Earth is like as cushy as it gets. It's the Goldilocks planet.
Men are from the planet that's like a padded room.
Yeah.
With one another, and they're teamed up against a dire situation. And I'd bet real money it's a huge ass reason why men gravitate towards activities that simulate being teamed up against an opposing force. But men are not machines of war. Yeah, testosterone absolutely gives you dumb bastard brain, but that just makes you want to skateboard a wagon down a hill or duct tape your friend to the wall. Not.
No. It does a lot more than that.
She had to call it that.
I'm so. First off, men are not machines of war. I'm sorry. Who the hell do we send into our wars?
Yeah.
Men. So shut the fuck up.
Well, the thing is that feminists act like war is something men want to do.
Right.
But it's not. It's just the reality is that sometimes they have to do it because we don't live in a fucking Garden of Eden paradise. We live on Earth where there are bad people, and sometimes they want to kill you and your family and your wife and your children, and you have to protect them because you don't want that to happen. And women aren't going to step up. So unfortunately, if you live on this planet War is a reality you have to cope with. Men don't necessarily want that. No one wants that except people who risk nothing in engaging in it and benefit from it. But that's like, 1% of the population. Yeah, politicians, people who don't actually risk anything and they might benefit. But aside from that, in general, most people are not fans of war. So when you say, oh, well, I mean, I know that she's trying to be charitable and saying, well, men aren't machines of war, but we also have to recognize that we live in a world where no more wars is a fucking pipe dream. That's just the truth. Okay.
We live in a world where the wars that are fought the men are being used as grist for the fucking mill. Okay.
Yeah.
There's no way to dance around that. And I don't care how many women want to stand up and say, oh, I enlisted. Oh, I served. Well, thank you for your service, ma'am. That's very great. I applaud you and I thank you for your service. However, that does nothing to say anything or to discredit the fact that the most of the people who die in war are men.
Yeah, like 99.9%. And
what women don't understand about this is when a woman serves, it is honorable, but it's a feather in her hat. She gets kudos for it. People are more than just proud. They're pleasantly surprised that this woman served, right? When men serve, it's an expectation. It's an obligation.
Yeah, it's an obligation. And the truth is, it's a reality. We just can't, we can say, there shouldn't be war, but that's just a stupid dream that a child has. The truth is, we will always live with it. So we're going to have to maybe we should, instead of complaining that wars happen on fucking planet Earth, we should just honor the people who are willing to make the sacrifice to fight, because that's what's going to happen sometime. Sorry, this is reality. Yeah. So,
well, and we should fight tooth and nail to make politicians good stewards of the human resource.
Yeah, because yeah.
Well, there will be people that'll call bullshit on what I said, but you find me one female politician in the history of United States politics who was asked to explain why she didn't serve during a wartime, any battle, anything. World War I, World War II. Ask any female politician, what were you doing during World War I or World War II? And shamed if she says, I was a homemaker, or I was stateside filling a job that a man vacated so he could go be cannon fodder. Right? Because men are shamed for not going to whatever war was going on during their youth, including wars that people opposed, like the Vietnam War. One of the things, and even if they were in the wrong service, men have been shamed for being in the National Guard instead of being Marines.
Yeah.
Because the National Guard doesn't have it as dangerous or difficult as a Marine during wartime. In the public eye, it's easy to turn around and say, well, you joined the National Guard so that you wouldn't have to go to the front lines. Right?
Yeah.
That's how men get treated. Women will never hear that. We don't even get drafted. Even progressives who claim to want equality, who claim to want women to have to be as tough as men and women to get credit for being as tough as men, will not band together and change the law so that selective service drafts both sexes. Yep. So, I don't want to hear it from anybody that's like, oh, it's not that different in the military between. It is worlds different.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's continue. It's just this framing, because this is all toxic masculinity language. I don't know if you guys have noticed.
Yep.
That's all this is. They're just saying, while this person started by saying, oh, I noticed that being a man is hard. And then what does she do? She goes on to blame men for it.
Yeah, men and their dumb bastard brains.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means.
I wanted to reach through the fucking screen when she said that. I'm sorry.
Testosterone makes my guys do stupid things. That's like the only thing it's good for, right?
Yeah, you
Is that
women,
like how your period gives you stupid bitch brain, where you want to go in and just eat somebody in retail alive? Because like I've been that person that gets eaten alive by the stupid bitch.
Yeah, you women and your illogical, immoral, or amoral fucking Neanderthal brains. Just shut up. Oh my god.
Yeah, okay, let's continue.
Kill someone. The human species looks so much colder standing from this side. I can see how men might convince themselves that their feelings of emotional desperation is personal weakness, as opposed to a symptom they're experiencing from white imperialism. Because the human
white imperialism did this, guys.
So she basically just said that black men are not masculine.
Well, that black men take their cues from white imperialism. So they're just a victim of that system.
They don't man for themselves.
Yeah.
Well,
remember.
I mean,
I'm sorry, but no.
I can't drive this home enough. I gotta say, remember, this is a trans woman or trans man opining on men, and we're supposed to listen to that person.
Right.
Like, this person who's been a man all of a few months, and they're bringing all their feminist garbage with them, and then, like, putting it all on men to explain their depression because they're struggling. Because that's what this is. I'm sad. This must be the fault of a system. No, maybe it's just you. Maybe you did the wrong thing when you transitioned because clearly you can't handle it.
And it can't go without being unsaid that, if we want to talk about black men and who they listen to, well, they mostly listen to their mothers and the females around them that they grew up with, and it's not just a black epidemic, even though it is very, very endemic to the black population. But yeah, they listen to the women around them when they don't have a father around them to show them how to be a man. They listen to the women around them, and now you're blaming them for what? For what their mothers taught them? Good job, Anna.
Yeah, and of course, well, again, Anna's still just reading the letter.
Yeah,
but I think that it's partly because she agrees with all of the sentiment that this person is putting out there. Like, trans men have more authority to discuss men than men do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
human condition is
toxic
as essential
feminism
for our well-being as water is. So sick, how sick. I want to destroy this garbage. End quote. And wow, right? Just wow. I have.
So this is she's obviously finished quoting. And now she's going to give her 2 cents, or whatever, her 3 minutes.
Been in a place where I'm really trying to unpack a lot of things that have been taught to me that don't serve me, and that may be pretty outdated. Like, Pluto isn't a planet anymore. Neanderthal is pronounced Neanderthal. So maybe the foundational knowledge I have about more important things, like
she just found that out.
Maybe the things that were taught to me when I was tiny, impressionable clay just aren't valid anymore.
Yeah, and vaccine doesn't mean a vaccine anymore.
I mean, I think she's trying to be funny and
is failing.
Inject some levity. So I wouldn't get hung up on the pronunciation of Neanderthal or Neanderthal.
I was gonna say, because I remember that being a thing in the 80s.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure that this woman either knew that and thought, well, I'm gonna say this anyway because I think it's entertaining and funny. Or she did just discover that, but ultimately, if she doesn't know what a Neanderthal is anyway, because she doesn't understand human nature.
Does she write her own scripts? Is this all her?
I mean, probably. I don't know. She's kind of like astroturfed YouTube celeb, so I wouldn't be surprised because she works for Disney. So I wouldn't be surprised if they basically supply her with all of her scripts, and all she has to do is be pretty and read them out. So
yeah.
All right.
And look, even saying female privilege makes me want to recoil, but I like that I'm really aware of how much I am rejecting that phrase and idea. Because when I listen to the words of Zan, who has crossed the gender divide, I agree. Having close, intimate, high quality friendships is an absolute privilege. And I can see now how my gender sets me up.
Okay, I gotta pause it there. That's
I
not.
You should have
that's
paused
not
it a
the
while
priv-
ago.
I'm sorry.
She likes that she's rejecting this idea of female privilege. you really it hasn't occurred to you that maybe there might be a tiny kernel of truth in there somewhere? No. You read that whole it didn't click.
No.
Okay.
She has to reject it because the trans man's letter, again, because trans men they have the authority to speak on men's experience more than men do. She has to acknowledge when the trans man says, I'm now experiencing the feeling of what it's like to lose a privilege I didn't know I had. Now, I think it's worth, this is the question she doesn't ask and the trans man doesn't ask. Where did you get the idea that you had no privilege? Like, what? I wonder if there's an ideology, like a set of notions that have been reinforced all throughout academia, politics, the media, our entertainment, the news, over the course of 100 years that has reinforced the idea that women are put upon and they are oppressed for all time, forever, by men at the expense of women and to the benefit of men. I wonder where that notion could possibly have come from and if it had an effect on your life choices. I have no, you know what? I'm drawing a blank. I have no idea what it could be. It's probably something that I should look into, I think. This is like the thing, every time I see this, it comes down to, where'd you get the idea that you're basically living as a slave in our modern society? Where'd you get that from? Because I don't know if that's true. And now they act on that, and then their lives are shit, and they're like, why is this happening? And they're blaming the same thing. Well, it must be men's fault. You know, it must be. Keep on doing that and see how things go for you. So anyway, that's basically, you know, but because like people like Ana Akana and the trans man that wrote this letter, that's all they got. Like all they know is blaming systems for their situation. And you know what? Let's make everyone's situation. Men, yours too. Yes, I know it's weird, but it's your fault that we are afraid of you. And it's and don't want anything to do with you. But that's your fault. Because, you know, garden variety homophobia for some reason. Even though what is considered the reason why, because I just had a conversation with some guys in the XY crew, which is part of Paul Elam's like, you know, community for men. And I was just talking with these guys and I said, we were talking about you know, not homophobia, but like men the reasons why, or some of the reasons why men don't engage in as much physical intimacy with each other as women do. And there's all of these theories, and most of them come out of queer theory and feminist theory and other Marxist ideas. But I said, you know, I don't think that's true. I think that in general, men don't have a problem with physical contact with other men. I mean, we have our own language, like we have bro hugs and, you know, like we do different kinds of handshakes and things like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We don't have to behave just like women, you know, like to show, you know, a connection with other men. I don't think it's necessary. But when it comes to the sort of like, the thing that feminists blame men and homophobic men, basically just being a man means you're a homophobic person anyway, just ask Eric Anderson. The thing is that that's not reinforced by other men, that's reinforced by women. Because if women see men behaving a little too chummy with each other, the women think that man might be gay, and if he's gay, he might not be able to protect me if I need him to. Women are the ones that essentially reinforce masculine behavior. When men are alone, you know, with each other, and they're not, like, this is under the presumption that they're not homosexual, because if they are, that changes everything. It doesn't mean the same thing. So I'm talking about straight men. When straight men are around each other and they're close, like they're friends, they can be intimate in ways that women couldn't understand, and they don't do it the same way women do. But for some reason, we're fixated on women's ways of expressing, you know, like intimacy and friendship, and we think that it's the right way to do it without even like looking to see what men do and their way of doing things. Okay, so like that's the one thing. So I think women do that because, and this is one of the reasons why men might rib their friends into being more masculine, or they try to push them or encourage them to be more masculine because they're concerned that women will be driven away from those men. So they might do it for each other, like, hey man, you know, stand up straight, you know, there's ladies around. It's not because they're afraid they will be perceived as gay by other men. It's because they're afraid that they won't be seen as masculine by women. And women measure that. And that's just the truth. Like, women want masculine men. So that's what they're going to call for.
A lot of it revolves around having control over men as a resource. And women control men as a resource through gynocentrism, and as particularly through the gynocentric focus on women's welfare. A gay man is not going to be as invested in the welfare of the women around him.
Exactly.
Because he's not looking for a mate among the women around him. And so women cannot use their sexuality to control a gay man. And there's an interesting thing that'll happen. You have sort of two responses. You have the privileged response and the beta response. So homophobic women will see gay men as a threat to their social status and their social monopoly, their control over a social environment. And then you have the beta response, which is, this guy can be my gay BFF, and I can't control this man. Now he's fascinating, and I want to hang out with him and treat him like a girl. And they'll do that in a way to make that lack of control less scary. Well, if I think of this guy as a girl, even though, like, most of the gay men I've known are actually not at all effeminate. Like, there's not, you know, and you can say, what do they do something? Do they have a hobby? Do they grow flowers? Well, some of the most macho straight guys I knew grew flowers. My grandfather was a boxer, and he grew roses. I couldn't go near his garden, but you know, but yeah, like there aren't things you can say, well, this guy cooks, you know, that makes him feminine. Well, no, you know, some guys cook and they yell bam when they throw the ingredients in, like, what's his name?
Like, men make the best
chefs.
Men make the best chefs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's you know, some of it is the difference in senses there too, but in any case, so you have this situation where, because they are threatened by not being able to use their sexuality to control this man, they have to find a way to I don't know, disarm him, and that's it. Yeah, like, you're my effeminate gay BFF. Well, what if he's not effeminate? Well, you can pretend, and that's it. That's all you get with these kind of women. They don't. I don't see very many women treating these men on an equal level, and those are there's overt homophobia there, and there's covert homophobia there.
They treat those men as accessories.
Yes,
in many ways. So and you know, gay men aren't interested anyhow. So maybe they don't mind being treated that way, but that is the relationship as I noticed it. Again, I've been around gay men, trans women, the whole shebang, lesbians, and yeah, there's a lot of that. It's like, I don't know, it's like people making free choices, but I think it's strange. So yeah, I mean, I believe that all of this stuff that feminists say men do to each other, which they consider toxic masculinity and homophobia, I think most of that comes from women. I think women set the bar for what men, how men should behave, and men try their best to live in accordance with that. And other men, because they want those men to find a good woman too, and they want, because like men don't want to covet all the ladies in general. They want to see their friends as romantically successful as they are, and they are all hoping to take it. That's why we have wingmen. You know, women don't do that for each other.
They probably also.
They literally bring women with them to the club who are fatter and less attractive, so that those women will look better by contrast.
Right. But I think men probably also don't want there to be shitloads of unattached women, because unlike men, unattached women, one way or another, become wards of the state, and whose tax dollars end up having to pay that. So they don't want to support her through their tax dollars. They do want her to have some romantic success with some guy, even if it's not them. Yeah. So they do police each other, and I've kind of seen that in different ways too, because I've seen guys tell other guys, you know, maybe your standards are wrong. Have you considered this girl or that girl? And they'd probably go out with you, and it seems like almost like they're trying to make sure all the women are taken.
Yeah. And just to be clear, like I think that there are cases where men, like, they try to screw over other men so that they get more, you know, like, access. But I think that comes from either men who are, you know, they express dark triad traits like Machiavellian, you know, psychopathic, like they will use other men to get to, you know, to give themselves the maximum access to women. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen, obviously, but I'm saying if you're around good dudes and you're not insecure and you're not a narcissist and you're, you know, you don't think that the only way you can, like, get yours is by screwing your friends over, I think that they will instead want to bring out the best in the men in their circle, so that everyone has, you know, a shot. And if there's, like, plenty of available women who are good around, so in your environment, you'll probably do that. I think there was a time where that was probably more likely than not, where you had, like, decent women and decent men, and they're trying to find each other and they're willing to help each other out. But today, I think the dating market is in really bad shape, so I don't think you're going to see it as much. But you know, I think that that's a whole other conversation. So, but all right, let's continue the video.
Up in Western society to have that. You know, I'm a baby queer, and I think we're learning all the time. Hopefully, we're learning all the time how to unpack the biases and falsehoods that we've been given by a generation that was even more susceptible to social messaging than we are, because we have the internet. You know, it takes work.
I have to wonder what a baby queer is.
She just came out recently, and she's still learning. You know, it's the usual stuff. Like, apparently choosing an identity is like taking a class in high school, and you don't know everything yet, and whatever.
I see.
So,
she's got her queer training wheels on.
Yeah.
So basically, she's talking about learning other people's rules for what her sexuality is based on the feminine rules of the social environment.
Yeah, like all of this queer stuff, all of this stuff is all essentially, it doesn't exist as some third gender or some you know, fluid gender. It's basically all measured by how far away it is from masculinity. That's like there are two genders. There's the masculine, and then there's everybody else. The whole spectrum. And it's all on the other side, and it's all morally superior to masculinity. Because masculinity is the enemy. And they set it up that way. And it's very important that you understand this. There are two genders. Masculine and everybody else. And if you're a man and you're like, I'm a man, I'm heterosexual, I'm happy in this body with my preferences as they are, I want to marry a good woman, I want to start a family, I want to raise my kids. Like, if you are that, you are the worst thing to these people. The worst thing. And so why would that be if their identities don't exist specifically to essentially oppose yours? Even your wife, who might be happily married to you, you know, and all of that, she will be reviled because she's sleeping with the enemy, but even then they assume she is a victim of you. So that's all of queer theory. That's the whole thing. It's the whole thing.
Like they want everyone to accept them and their lifestyles, right? But as soon as it comes to them having to accept a person who has a more traditional lifestyle, oh, now you're a bigot. If you don't accept me in the way that I live, you're a bigot. Well, what happened to the whole acceptance thing here, people?
Well, men don't deserve it. Every day is man day. I thought you knew, Lauren.
I guess.
And apparently, like, even in the cases where a modicum of sympathy for men's, unique struggles and challenges, even when that comes up, feminists have to figure out how to blame them for it. That's literally this video. So, all right, continuing on.
Why we think what we think, and more importantly, how do we dismantle it? And I can't count the amount of time.
Why do we need to dismantle it? Of course, they're
everything
all about
has to be dismantled.
It all has to be torn down, right? And this is kind of, she just sort of says that, and then I don't think she comes back to it. But that's a really important thing that she just said. That's not insignificant. That's what they want to do. They want to dismantle the very notion of gender. That's what queer theory is. And I've warned for a long time now, people that are gay, lesbian, bisexual, and trans, that the queer theory is going to destroy all of that, because those two things cannot coexist. Because homosexuality with men, lesbianism with women, bisexuality with both, and transgenderism are all operating in a binary. And the queer theorists despise the concept of the binary. So they're going to come for those people once it looks like they have enough political influence or cultural influence, because then the bisexuals, the lesbians, the gays, and the trans people that want to transition from one gender to the other, which is basically all of them, they're all going to be the enemy of the queer theory. And then it won't be LGBTQIA plus, it'll be Q. That's it. So
I want to point out something about the language that she's using specifically. Dismantle, if you think of the history of the word dismantle, it evolved as a description for removing the defenses from a fort, right? And mantle was something had to do with your fortifications, or what you wear, your armor, your clothing. And to dismantle is to disrobe, so it's disrobing the village, right? Or disrobing the fortress. And it's about being able to go in and capture or kill the people inside. And when she's talking about dismantling our social structures and our social norms and so on, and our gender norms and the people involved in it, she's talking about removing the fortifications, the things that make our social structure strong and defensible and keep the people inside safe as a community. So remove that, just get rid of it, let's take it all down, because we want to make a social change. And this isn't really about understanding people and helping people and bringing people into the next evolution of human existence. It is about destroying the current social environment and the current societal norms.
Yeah, it's a revolution against normality, basically. Like, I wouldn't even call being married with children trad. It's just what normal people do. It's what normal people do. It's not supposed to even be seen as a political act, but for these people, it is a political act. Anything that you do that you think is just normal, like, hey, I'm a man and I like women, and I particularly like women with fat asses, small waists, and big tits, they're going to see that preference is political to them. Because you don't like fat women, you don't like trans women, you don't like non-binary individuals, you are a bigot. And that's literally, like, they've been pushing that for years. Like, this idea that if you're a man and you claim to be heterosexual, but you won't sleep with trans women, then obviously you're a transphobe. This is what they believe. This isn't just like it's not a joke. And so, like, their whole thing is it's an attack on the normal. They're calling the normal conservative, but it's not conservative per se. It's just the way that most people want to live their lives. And that's bad because they don't want that. You know, they want to make their fringe ideas that exist on the borders of our, culture, and they want to bring them towards the center and make them the mainstream and push the normal shit out to the fringes. Mm-hmm. And it's working in a way because, like, think about it like this. Look, I don't hate the idea of people having tattoos. So, before people get all bent out of shape because they have tattoos and they think I'm like coming after people with tattoos. But when I was a kid, tattoos were so rare, like on people. They were so rare that it got everyone's attention if you saw someone with a tattoo. And it could just be like a mom tattoo on their shoulder. Or maybe some military tattoo that was otherwise concealed or whatever. Today, like, people just have sleeves and they just have full tattoos on their legs and all over their belly and chest and stuff. And, strippers commonly have tattoos all over their body. It's very normal. People will get tattoos on their face, right? That was unheard of only like 40 years ago. And I think that is what I'm talking about. That's like, one could argue that seemed a bit organic. Like, okay, we just got really into tattoos at some point. They just became more and more common. But it's at the point now where if I see someone that doesn't have tattoos, it's surprising to me. That's like how far it's gone. And I think this is about bringing the fringe towards the center, right? And normalizing the fringe and denormalizing or perhaps deconstructing the center and pushing it out. So I think that's when she says dismantle, I agree with Hannah. And that is basically what it is. She doesn't think normality as it exists for the average person, and they don't even have to be American. Like every culture has a similar idea about normality. Muslims get married and have children with women just like Americans do. But the difference is that she wants to dismantle that notion as an idea of normality itself. Mm-hmm. And that's what queer theory is. And that, don't even get me started on the predatory aspects of queer theory. But if you want to look into it, there's a feminist named Rubin from the 80s that wrote extensively on the subject. So, and it's creepy.
It's not acceptance for acceptance sake. It's beating you down into submission until you have to say, okay, yes, I agree, I accept.
Yeah.
All
right, let us continue.
Times I've made like stupid jokes about how men are trash. And so some of the work I've been doing specifically around gender is to just intentionally and actively look at, why do I think that? And what is the male experience, whether that's cis or not? And how am I contributing to the toxic masculinity in that space? How am I making it unsafe for men to express themselves emotionally? And what am I taking for granted as someone who is female identifying and assigned at birth?
Oh, God. What, do you guys have a thought on that? So she is. Go ahead.
It's interesting that she thinks that if she thinks about it hard enough, she'll just understand without consulting any men who are male assigned at birth who identify as men. Like basically men who were born boys and grew up as boys and didn't have to transition to be men. Like she's not going to ask a single straight cis man about his experiences. Not one. She's just going to theorize about them and then decide that she has hit upon some truth that men have to live by because it appeared in her head. That's so feminine.
Yeah, it is. It is. She's just, yeah, exactly. The other thing too is she's still operating within this feminist paradigm where she's saying, oh, you know, I've treated men like shit. That must be toxic masculinity too. Or maybe you're just treating men like shit.
No, it's not toxic feminism.
No, it can't be. How is that possible? But she did say that. She said, oh, I'm contributing to toxic masculinity by saying men are trash and not like being more sensitive. Like, you're literally going to be even less funny than how little funny you were before you stopped trashing men. And I don't even think she's going to stop trashing men because
she has not.
Well, yeah, she's like saying it with sympathy, but she's basically being abusive to men.
Yeah,
just the premise of the video is because it's like, again, and it bears repeating, a trans man is more legitimate than a man to her. Like, their complaints are more legit because they've lived in both worlds. Ooh, and it's like, but they haven't even lived in their world as a woman long enough to understand women's struggles, and they haven't like barely scratched the surface on men. So
like
she's less informed than the average man or woman.
You gave up on being a woman. How the hell do you think you're gonna succeed at being a man, bitch? I don't know.
Nuts. Okay. Anyway, continuing.
And all of this means like really taking accountability for the ways in which we move through the world consciously and unconsciously. And that is exactly what I loved about Zan's post. Like, yes, okay, women are overwhelmingly the majority of victims when it comes to sexual assault and murder. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But
No. Don't just say that and then walk away. Men are far and away more likely to be murdered. I don't even know where she's getting that from. Like, what?
The usual talking points. I mean,
of course.
And sexual
Feminist
assault,
talking point.
if you count prisons, which I would, because when men are sent to prison, firstly, we don't know what they're sent in for. So we don't presume that prison rape is part of their sentence because it's not. Like, a guy could go into prison for tax evasion and get fucked in the ass. Does that mean he deserves it? I don't care if you're a murderer that gets sent to prison. Prison is the punishment, not rape. Like, if you want well-adjusted men that are going to re-enter society without, like, going back to their old habits or even doing something worse, we probably shouldn't be allowing them to get raped in prison, because that's probably going to make them a little damaged upstairs.
A little bit, do you think?
So yeah, I'm going to say that prison rape is still rape, and that men in general in prison don't deserve it. And so if you count those numbers, then yes, men are far and away more likely to be victims of rape and murder. So when she says, oh, I know that women are more victimized by these things, no, you're wrong.
No, they're not.
What you're talking about.
I mean, hell, even the threat of rape for a man going to jail is enough for him to shit his pants and rethink his life. You know, it's not.
Oh yeah, man. Like, men are terrified of going to prison specifically because they're not looking forward to being raped. So,
yeah.
or murdered in prison. I mean, you know,
right.
So
that's the thing. It's a horribly violent environment. It isn't really conducive at all to rehabilitation.
No.
And we look at it as though, you know, it's a benefit to society, but the truth is it's containment. It's nothing more than a containment system. And it never will be any better than that until we reform the system. Yeah. And the reason that our society is okay with that and has been okay with that all this time isn't because we don't care about criminals. It isn't because we think, well, they did something bad, they just deserve to be disposed of for their. It's because of male disposability. If 95% of people in prisons were women, we would not, as a society, have this attitude. And the reason I know this is because anytime an initiative comes out to reform the prison system, it specifically is to benefit women in prison.
Yeah.
It's very rare for something to be just for men in prison. We got to do this to make it easier for men and that get out of prison to assimilate into their communities. We got to do this to make sure that men are coming out of prison reformed and so on. No, it's women. They're always worried about women's experiences in prison. They're worried about whether it's fair to put women in prison. They're worried about whether or not women have received the benefits of a rehabilitative environment in prison.
Yeah.
They don't give a rat's ass about men.
No, they don't. Because again, the conversation on the way that we run prisons would be, I would assume, led by feminists, because they would want to sort of reevaluate the prison system to minimize violence. So because like the violence in prison often makes the men in prison worse. So, it's like, what kind of society do you want? But of course, once a man goes to jail, nobody cares what happens to them after that. Like, people just, he wasn't a good member of the community, therefore we don't care what happens to him.
He gets treated like a throwaway.
Yeah, he's basically like, you are no longer a member of this club. Stay in that jail cell. And they don't care if that guy never gets back out, if he's abused in there, if he's killed in there. They don't care. And this is like most people, because they just dismiss them. And again, that's they just basically, it's like sweeping them under the rug and then pretending like they don't exist. So Senior Sticks gives us $2 and says, but prison is not about rehab, it's about punishment.
Punishment is about rehab. See, this is the thing. People talk about punishment as if it's the goal and there's nothing else. But we wouldn't use punishment in society if we weren't trying to change people's behavior. So, yes, it's about punishment and not rehab. No, it's not about punishment and not rehab. Punishment itself is about rehab. It's just not necessarily always the right way. And if your only means of punishment is to create a violent environment that trains a person to engage in violent behaviors, to hide, to lie, to cheat people,
survive.
to behave like a predator in order to survive, you create a person who is going to come out in the rest of society accustomed to behaving like a predator in order to survive, and they're not going to fit. They're not rehabilitated. They're going to end up right back in the prison system. You doom them to ending up right back in the prison system, and you doom the people around them to experience more crime.
Yeah. But the punishment is necessary, because it is like a part of it is that you're basically not allowed to see your friends, your family, and the people closest to you for however long. And remember, not every man who's sent to prison, firstly, a lot of men are sent that shouldn't go. Secondly, a lot of them don't commit really violent crimes. They might be in for tax evasion. They might be in for something minor, maybe something they didn't follow up on, whatever, right? And they will get treated the same as like a serial rapist. So it's not like the conversation should be about how we don't, unless we're going to just execute every man who's arrested, which is a terrible idea. We should be thinking about ways that the men that go to jail will essentially be more productive and happier members of society when they get out. And I know that there are services there's church and there's rehab, for people who have a drug problem, and there are jobs that you can do. But maybe all I'm thinking is, you know, you with prisons, you offer those services to the men that want it, and for the you know, for those that are antisocial or engage in violent behavior, you protect the other men, the other inmates from those people, so that they're not abused, because the people who are antisocial and violent in prisons, they basically want, they have experienced trauma themselves in most cases, and they want other people to have the same traumatic experiences that they had. So they hurt others as a means of communicating their own pain. So we have to try to help them, but we also have to protect other men from them. So, all right, anyway, back to the video.
But outside of that really extreme violence, in what ways can I, as an individual, take care of other human beings, regardless of how they identify? And in what ways can we work together to dismantle old systems that are leaving half of the population incredibly lonely, emotionally starving, and malnutritioned socially? Because I can't imagine a life without my friends and without a support system.
All right, I'm just going to pause it there. So she's saying that it's patriarchy. She says old systems, but she doesn't name it.
Right.
So she says, essentially saying patriarchy is what keeps men isolated and lonely.
You know why she doesn't name it? Because the minute that she says patriarchy, people would see through her shit and stop watching the video.
Yeah, the word patriarchy is not as popular anymore. Like this kind of woke rhetoric. I've noticed that wokies have been trying to like rebrand themselves as like, you know, less brain dead wokies, and so they use new words, new language. But it's ultimately they're still selling the same snake oil though.
They've been doing that for a long time. Like when I was on Reddit, the discussion was, well, it's not patriarchy theory anymore. Now it's kyriarchy. In it, which is basically just oligarchy,
intersectional patriarchy.
Yeah, it's oligarchy with the progressive stack thrown in.
Yeah.
Still patriarchy though. I mean, yeah, they'll rename it, but it's the same thing.
Couple extra steps.
Yeah, it is. It's patriarchy
Pretty much.
with extra steps.
With extra steps, yeah.
Senior Sticks gives us $2 and says that used to be the case, but now there's private prison. Do you think that private prisons are just like bad because they're private? I mean, because I hear that a lot, but I don't know. I'd like to know that private prisons have an incentive to essentially do a better job of rehabilitating criminals so that they will be used for more of the you know, for more of their services. So
yeah.
Are you just saying I hate private prisons because they're private? Or is there like actual data or evidence that shows that private prisons are a worse idea than, say, government-owned prisons?
One incentive that private prisons have that government-owned prisons do not have is if you are a private business and you are sued because of wrongful treatment that took place within your business, you can go bankrupt. You don't have infinite cash coming in that you can siphon off of the population around you. If the government gets sued, first of all, you have to get the government's permission to sue the government. And then if you get the government's permission to sue the government and the government loses and they have to pay, they're just paying with everybody else's tax dollars, and they can just, you know, tax people more. They could just raise taxes. Well, we have to raise taxes because this guy sued. And that's it. They don't lose anything. So a private prison does have an incentive to avoid being sued by the prisoners. And they do have an incentive to not have such a pattern of recidivism that they get accused of fraud.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to the video. We're almost at the end here.
The idea that 50% of the people I know have to have that life, that is incredibly sad. So I hope Zan's words and unique perspective also reach you and help you look at the ways in which we can operate in a more conscious, compassionate place to create a better world for everyone. I'm Ana Akana. Thank you to the patrons who supported today's video, and thank you as always to my daddy Squarespace for sponsoring.
All right, so that's the end of the video. She goes into a Squarespace ad after this. So
I feel like she's not going to use this experience to be more compassionate toward men, treat them better, try to understand why they do the things they do that she gets annoyed about, and so on. But instead, as a springboard for telling men that they're manning wrong and they need to change the way they're doing it, because she is unhappy seeing them man that way, and she wouldn't like to live that way, and therefore they can't, even if they're comfortable with it.
Or I think, or what will happen, maybe likely, is that she'll try to treat the men around her as though they're women. Like she'll
Mm-hmm.
and not understand why it's not hitting home with them. You know, because I'm treating you like you're one of us. You know, that's not it. She's completely missing the mark about what it is that makes men value each other's friendship and how it differs from women. She's not gonna get it, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think that she's paying lip service because she doesn't want to come across as, you know, hating men. But I think that she does, because she essentially, her reality is framed as though men are the cause of all of our problems, and only women and the feminine is a solution. And when I say the feminine, I include queerness, non-binariness, and all of it, because that is the framing. There's basically like masculinity and not masculinity, and not masculinity is good and masculinity is bad. The other thing too is that if she gets men to behave like women, other women are going to be very unhappy with that, because it's women who select men based on their masculinity and their competency and their confidence and their effectiveness and their ability to protect them. And so what you would have to do is remove the essence of men in order to make them accessible and safe for you, which is this one woman saying this. But the average woman is going to be very unhappy with that, because the average woman wants the toxically masculine man. Like, that's what women want. So, but feminists want to make men unattractive to women. So that's why they do this. They engineer men away from their nature, and then women don't find that attractive. And I'm talking about normal women, not necessarily feminist women, obviously not. And they're going to speak up. And so because Ana Akana makes the most important mistake that most feminists make when they talk about toxic masculinity, she leaves out women's input, which is everything. So
True.
Yeah, and I have to wonder how many of how much of her audience is male, right? Because she's not, she's pretty easy on the eyes, you know. I don't know, maybe she's
I'm sure there are a lot of men that watch because she's pretty, but I think that her content courts women, so she might. Well, I would say that it's probably mostly men, simply because YouTube is mostly men. But and maybe that's what this is. Like, she's throwing them a fucking dog treat. Yeah. Well, here, guys. Yeah, you guys do have problems, but they're your fault. And this trans man, he knows what's up better than you. So I don't want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from the trans man. So, I mean, like, the reality, if she knew the reality of what it is, and the trans man included, if they knew the reality of what pressures there are on men, and they're not coming from patriarchy, and they're not coming from toxic masculinity, they're mostly coming from women. If they knew that, their heads would explode. Like, there was a meme going around. I might have to like look for it. V Monroe made a video about it though, and it was this meme with like the you know, the feels girls, like the, I don't know what you call them, but they're like Wojak women, and there's like a trad one and a goth one, and they're like talking to each other about like, you know, what their plans are for the future, and they're like, you know, kind of bubbly and excited and happy. And then there was like, and they're obviously friends, and then there was like a man, like the Chad guy, the Chad yes guy, and his face is all dark because he's like really sad, and he's basically thinking that unless he, you know, operates in service to society, that no one will have any respect for him, and he's basically going to die alone, and he has to, like, you know, he has to be a man worthy of the attention of women and the praise of the people around him, or something to that extent. And I guess it blew up on Twitter and people were discussing it, but even though it's kind of hyperbolic, it's not that hyperbolic. Like, I think that men know, you know, that they don't just get to enter society and then like they just get love from people or admiration. They have to do something. And so like this is the thing that men know, and women just completely take it for granted.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even if the thing that man does to get attention is negative attention, it's still something. He's trying to get some kind of attention, you know, regardless of
they're gonna freak out in the chat over that.
I know my man.
Yeah, I'm restraining myself from spazzing out.
my man's head. Yeah. My man's head is spinning right now. Anyway, regardless,
well, that's because English is his first language.
Yeah,
real English, not American. Not American.
But regardless of the consequences to him, you know, he will do what it takes to get that kind of attention. And women just don't have to do that. They literally can just stand around. They have so much attention that they feel slighted. They feel disgusted whenever someone even looks at them in a way, or smiles, or tries to shake their hands. She will turn up her nose as if you're just some peasant, you know, and you have to ask permission for the royalty to embrace them. That's how entitled women are, and they don't even realize it. It just turns my stomach.
Mm-hmm. You know, we actually, growing up, we get some pretty dishonest messages about the world from the adults around us. People routinely tell little girls, you can do anything. And it's bullshit. No, you can't.
No.
You can't do anything. You have a set of aptitudes. You have a set of interests. Mm-hmm. Where your aptitudes and your interests intersect is going to be what you're best at, because you're going to have the discipline to practice it. And if you're really disciplined, you can develop your aptitudes that you don't have an interest in by practicing those as well. But outside of your aptitudes, you're going to bring yourself up to an average level, mostly, because you're going to be so frustrated that you're not going to dedicate the time to excel at those things. And that's okay. It's okay to not be good at everything. And boys get told that they have to rely on their strengths. And you can't necessarily be the star of everything, and you can't necessarily do everything that you want, and you can't necessarily have everything that you want. And so they grow up with a much more realistic understanding of the world around them. Find your niche, do your best, be the best that you can be in it, and you know, earn your way. And so you have, now they want to know why so many women go into STEM, so many young women go into STEM and then drop out of it. It's because it's either not within their aptitude, or they don't have the attitude of interest toward that. Mm-hmm. And so even if they're good at math, or they're good at logic outside of numbers and stuff, and you know, somebody wanted them to be a scientist or a doctor or whatever, they don't do the work and exercise the discipline it takes to excel at that, and then they get frustrated because they're not at the top of their class, and suddenly they are mediocre, and it bothers them and they drop out.
Exactly.
And it's really sad because there are many things that people can excel at besides STEM that are very important in society. We don't just need doctors and scientists and mathematicians and people that create technology. We need people who provide care for other people when they're sick, that are not at the top of the medical food chain, but the hands-on people that come in with your food and help you eat if your hands don't work or you have a lack of awareness. The people that come in and wipe your butt if you're incontinent. We need people in society that will do that and do it in such a way that preserves the dignity of the individual they're taking care of, that have that compassion. And a lot of those people are women. A lot of those people that can come in and take care of an individual and recognize, gosh, Bob is having more trouble than usual hearing during the last week. Maybe we should talk to the doctor about examining his ears. And that's the only way that you find out that Bob has a buildup of wax in his ears and needs to have the wax removed. And and those types of situations are they're life crises for people if there is no caregiver. Right? Yeah. And it's the same thing at the other end of it. You need janitors. You need people who pick up the garbage. You need people that drive the garbage truck, the humongous, hard to steer, hard to get through narrow areas garbage truck, and be able to operate that crank that picks up a dumpster and dumps it into the truck and then put it back down in the right place. Mm-hmm. Right? The idea that you tell girls you can do anything and then steer them only towards specific things that they're supposed to think are prestigious is actually a cruelty, and it's a cruelty to both sexes.
It absolutely is. And our current installed vice president is a number one example of that. Women can't obtain these levels because they don't see women in these positions. I'm sorry. Okay, so now you've installed this person, and what is she doing, and what is she proving to this younger generation that they should be attaining, or what they should be aspiring to?
That women are embarrassment in those positions.
Right. Lauren, you have to understand that it is only together that we can work together as a group together to actually accomplish our goals and get it done together. So,
and of course, one of those goals has to be understanding the passage of time.
Yes.
Oh my God. See, that's the thing. It hurts women in that it puts women in embarrassing positions and sets women up for failure. It hurts men in that it puts men in a position where they have to depend on those women. Mm-hmm. And having to depend on somebody who is unreliable is absolutely horrible.
Oh gosh.
I think everybody's had that experience at least once. Even if it's just you're the person on the team in a class project that does their work when somebody else didn't do theirs, and then you end up getting, an F because everybody gets the same grade, and it's unfair, right? But imagine if you're on a medical team and you have to rely on somebody who did not belong in medicine. Imagine if you are the person who's providing that direct care on a medical team and you're relying on a female doctor or a female nurse that doesn't have a passion for higher medicine. And you can be a great female doctor or female. I had a great female doctor. Female doctors saved my life, right? But I've also run into female doctors that didn't have the passion for medicine, didn't have the passion for figuring out the puzzles that are involved in healing people and dealing with, the grossest parts of human healing and human health. And they suck. When you end up with somebody like that, they really suck. And being on the team with that person and having to rely on that person, and they fail the entire team and the patient is just horrifying, because you end up with people who suffer and you feel responsible for that person's suffering because your teammate let you down, and there's nothing you can do in a situation like that to make up for your teammate's failure.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a difference between being able to do a thing and then actually caring about doing it. Right.
Yeah.
And it just makes the world of difference.
Well, for many, it's about the signal. It's not about the action itself. It's about telling people that you care, identifying as caring, but not actually doing anything. While good people, they just put their heads down and get it done. So, all right, I got some super chats and a super chow. I should read through those. Let me just check Rumble. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Nope, looks good. So and then we'll close it out and go into the patron show because I don't want to be up super late. So Senior Sticks gives us $5 and says private prison are about profit. Second is patriarchy the ultimate grift for feminist grifters. Well, obviously, yes, to the second.
Yeah, just like demonizing profit is the ultimate grift for Marxists.
Yeah. So I was going to say about private prisons, saying that it's about profit doesn't quite answer more important questions like what are the okay, first of all, what do private prisons get paid for? Is it the number of prisoners that they have? Is it their ability to rehabilitate those people? Is it like, what is it based on? Whether or not they get money. The other thing is, who pays them? Are they being paid by the government, even though they're supposedly a private prison? Because if they are, then it's not a private prison, even if it's privately owned. Because the state is paying them, which means that the state may not make or have the same expectations of what the prison should provide, since the state doesn't actually risk its own money, it risks ours, in order to essentially, pay for its services. So I think there are some questions you should ask. Now, what I would say is if you wanted a good privately owned prison, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, and it probably could work out better than government-owned prisons, because the thing with government-owned anything is they have absolutely no incentive or accountability, and they don't have to worry about the money that they spend because it's not theirs. And so if it comes out the bare minimum in terms of its own effectiveness, well, you're going to get what you get. But if there are private prisons and the private prisons pride themselves on being able to rehabilitate and help and, counsel and offer therapy and spiritual religious services to the prisoners to make them better, more productive members of society when they get out, well, I'm all for that. So, I'm looking at what is most effective, and historically the state has never been effective. Never.
The problem with government-owned anything is the government, right?
Yeah,
full stop.
exactly. Yeah. Or government-funded things,
Just for the record, prison rape culture and prison gang culture evolved in government-run prisons, and then transferred into privately owned prisons when the private prison system was created. Government-run prisons were about throwing men in and just leaving them there to rot. And it's not that private prisons have no problems, because they do, and they're still based on the old system. And I'm pretty sure if we set it up so that private prisons only got paid for how many
people they rehabilitated.
How many inmates after they left the prison system did not experience recidivism, which is when you commit a crime that gets you put back into the prison system, or you don't get paid for the same person twice or whatever, they might start using cult deprogramming instead of punishment. And I think that would work very well with gang members, people who have experienced a lifetime of violence, and that's why they commit crimes. I think the approach to rehabilitation is very backward and very dysfunctional and very judgmental and not very geared toward understanding how the brain works and not very geared toward actually reforming the way the individual thinks.
Right.
And you can't reform somebody who commits crimes until you reform the way they think. And that's where the cult deprogramming comes in. But I don't think it would matter whether it was a private prison or a government prison that you threw that into. I think the only difference would be you could guide it more easily with profit than you could with just policy.
Right.
Well,
it's about
I mean,
it's about incentives.
But my question then would be, well, where do these prisons earn their money from? Like, who is paying
That's what
them?
I'm-
Would it not then be the government as well?
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
So what is the difference?
Exactly. I mean, to a degree, it would still probably be better because the prisons would have to compete with each other to get the money from the state, but the profits or whatever should be based on the results, right? That's generally what we pay any private business owner. We pay them on their ability to deliver the results. So if you're just throwing guys in jail, then and the government's paying them, then there's no real difference then between government prisons and private prisons. Maybe private prisons do try to control the violence and things like that more, maybe, but it wouldn't be that much of a difference.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, aren't we as taxpayers paying for these prisoners to be in prison? So where is this profit coming from? Who is profiting and why? If we as taxpayers are paying to house these people, why is anyone making any kind of profit?
That's the same reason why people make a profit when we as taxpayers pay into the Medicaid system and somebody uses it to go to the doctor.
Right, but if we are not getting people who are being rehabilitated, right? This is supposed to be one of the pillars of the penal system, right? You're supposed to rehabilitate these people to get them back into society. If that's not happening, or is happening at a failing fucking rate, then I don't think these people should be making profit at all. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, show me
you
some
should be
people.
getting results.
Exactly.
Right.
Show me some people who have been released and now are tax-paying citizens. Right? That would be a result. That would be something that I would say, okay, I feel good about paying my taxes into this system. But right now, I don't. Whether it's clearly, I think the lines are very blurred between government funded and private. I think it just matters of, I think to me, in my lay person's terms, I'm thinking government funded prisons like Gitmo, right? Not like the prison that's in San Rafael, California, not the ones that you drive past. I think those are private, but still, again, what really is the difference? Yeah,
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, is a private prison if it's only private insofar as it's owned by an individual and not the state, but everything else operates like a regular state prison. So there's no point. It's almost pointless to criticize them because they behave in the same way as the government ones do, and they're probably, the people who run them are probably paid essentially just like either by the number of inmates or it's just like rent. And so and so I guess that it's kind of a pointless thing to compare, because I think a truly privately owned institution that was in the business of essentially separating dangerous people from the rest of society and keeping them away from everyone else, which is the main purpose of prison, and then working to rehabilitate those that can be, that would, I think, those would be different incentives, which would give you that now you can actually see what private prisons can do. But if they effectively are operated and run and funded in the same way that public ones are, well, then there's no point in getting all pissy over privately owned prisons, because publicly owned prisons do the same thing. So it's all a matter of what are the incentives, and the state has no incentives. They have no incentives to do their job. That's why they just use our money, because you can't fire them. You essentially give them authority over your life, and then you hope they don't use it to fuck you over. But privately owned businesses can't do that. Like they either sink or swim based on their merit. But if they're paid by the state, then that's like the sweetest deal ever. I'm like, oh, I'll take money from this unaccountable institution. So, let's just be clear, right? When you talk about profit as though it's this demonic evil, you are giving commies their due, and they don't deserve it, because they don't have an alternative solution. If they could, there'd be an entire city that was nothing but one giant mega prison, and they'd put anyone who dissents in there, and those people would get treated worse than our prisoners do now. So we don't want that. Okay, but anyway, Senior Sticks gives us $2 and says, well, girls can do anything, just not everything. Well, I mean, they can try to do anything.
Yeah, the problem is
be good at it.
The problem is they tell us that we can do everything, and it's not true that girls can do anything either. Boys can't do anything. Boys have a set of aptitudes and attitudes. Girls have a set of aptitudes and attitudes as well. It's really cruel to tell somebody that they can just be good at whatever they want to be good at, and not tell them how hard they have to work to make up for starting out really bad at something.
It's setting them up for failure.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah.
Like, and you can get better at things you're bad at, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very hard work, and girls often get set up to expect to just get better at it because they do it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And to not take criticism for it, not learn, and so on. It really is. It's bad for both sexes, because it sets girls up to fail, and it sets boys up to fall when they rely on girls that are set up to fail.
Yeah. I got a super chat from Albatross for $5, and he says, I like what you said about aptitude and attitude. There's no point in achieving this lofty career if you're only doing it just to one-up some rando.
Yeah, or because it's what your parents wanted you to do, or because you think people will like you better if you do it, or because somebody came into your school and said, we need more people of your sex doing this thing. Will you be one of them?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the super chat. And then we got a super chow from Shitposter, who gives us $5 and says, camaraderie in certain contexts. This is referencing the Ana Akana video. I don't think Akana knows what these contexts are. In my case, my friends and I created a context among ourselves by shitposting in real life, telling crappy jokes, laughing at the world, etc. Interestingly, this environment organically evolved into a place where we can actually talk about bigger life problems between ourselves. Yes, so this is like a classic case of women needing to be in men's business, because that's kind of what she's getting at. This is the whole toxic masculinity thing too. See, she would consider that to be toxically masculine because you're ribbing the world. And bear in mind, when these people talk about toxic masculinity or just men, doing things that they don't like, it's in men's nature to do the very thing that feminists and women in general despise, which is men operate they love to be right. So they understand the existence of borders. So they know that there are borders, physical ones. There are borders between people. There are borders in language. There's like lines, right, that you are not supposed to cross, or you are told you should not cross socially, physically, etc. But men, they like to dance on that line. They like to dance on that perimeter. It's where they get the most joy. They test boundaries. That's what boys do. They test their limits. They're the kind of people, because she said, testosterone is what makes a man want to race a go-kart on a ramp, right? And to potentially hurt themselves. Yes, because that is a boundary. A boy says, I wonder if I can make that jump. And so he does. He tries to do it. Now, the purpose of fathers in general, and mothers to some degree, is to essentially like gauge the risk. And, you know, if it looks like the boy's going to really hurt himself, then he'll intervene. But the play or the desire to do that, to like test the limits, is a masculine trait, full stop. So you guys are doing, you and your friends were doing something that was pushing that, but in a social way. And it was essentially like, oh, I'm going to say this thing that's kind of edgy. I'm going to use this gamer word. I'm going to, you know, like make this joke or pull this prank. This is what men do. But what they're doing is they're testing people's boundaries and their limits. And it's actually a way that men can learn whether or not they want to be friends with another man, because they'll do that with other men. And if those men respond really poorly, like they're sourpusses or they don't know how to have fun, then the man will generally avoid them, because it's like, well, this is not the kind of person that I'd like to be close to or friends with, because their boundaries are a lot more constrained than mine, and that's not going to work. And so that's exactly what you're right, shit poster, because that is the way, like the kind of humor that men have, the kind of risk taking they engage in, all of that, that's all within the male space. That's what men do. They try it with women on occasion, but women are generally less responsive because women are generally more agreeable, but they also, it's not just that women are agreeable, they also expect agreeableness. So if a man pushes boundaries and a woman gets upset, then she's basically saying, I don't like what you did, not just to my boundaries, but you're not being agreeable to my needs, and so I don't want to be around you. And that's how, you know, like say rambunctious boys, that's how they get in trouble with, you know, tattletale girls, for example.
Right.
So,
and that's also why like fathers will let their kids do things that you know, if their mothers were around, they wouldn't ordinarily do. You know, just wait till your mother's gone and don't tell her. You know,
don't tell your mother I let you do this. Yeah,
you can light those firecrackers. You can play with that fire. You can shoot that gun. You know,
you can watch Monty Python's The Meaning of Life at 8 years old.
Yeah, and this is also why I think when you run into girls that are like, they're okay with that kind of stuff, and they may even participate in it themselves, like tomboys. I think that boys are surprised, if not even intimidated by it, because they don't run into that very often.
Yeah.
But they generally adapt. You know, they'll usually like having a tomboy around, because, you know, then they know that that what they do isn't going to be like outwardly rejected, you know, hostily rejected by their social group, because there's a girl there that's willing to put up with it. Not even just that, but like be a part of it.
Once it's established that she's doing it out of interest and not for attention or control over a male social environment, it actually, from what I've noticed, when you do things that are traditionally masculine activities and you do them enthusiastically and well, guys love it. They don't just accept, they get excited about it. It becomes kind of a fun thing just to be the girl in that environment that doesn't act all the way like, you know, the other gals they know. Yeah. And then that wears off, and then you're just one of the guys. And it's nice to get to that point, because you don't have to. It doesn't take a lot of energy beyond your normal social energy. It doesn't take any oddness or extra attention or anything that you have to pay to just be one of the guys. It's actually a lot more relaxing than being one of the gals.
Yeah. Confirm. Absolutely confirm.
Jordan Peterson made a great video about the way that, you know, girls aggress. And I mean, it's not anything that we haven't talked about before, but if you want to get like his take, I think it's pretty good. Just go to his channel. I think that's it. I got all the super chats and super chows done. So I guess we can wrap it up.
Alrighty.
Go into the patron show. All right, so if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications. Let us know what you guys think about today's show and the video in itself. There is a link to it in the description. Follow us on alternative media. We're on Rumble at HB Radio. We're on DLive at Honey Badger Radio, Twitch at Honey Badger Radio. Just look them up and follow us on all those alternative platforms, because our time on YouTube is probably like not meant to last. I mean, I don't know when the worm will turn, but it may. So, be sure to leave us a comment. And most importantly, please share this video, because sharing is caring. It really helps us out. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show. We're going to go into the after show now. So we hope to see you guys there. That's it from us. So have a good one, everybody.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.